What just happened in Australia could hit your mortgage, your savings, and even your job faster than you think. Inflation slowed, but the central bank is still keeping rate hikes locked and loaded. Consumer prices cooled slightly, but they are still running hot enough for the Reserve Bank of Australia to say, in effect, the fight against inflation is not over. That means interest rates may have to go even higher, keeping borrowing costs elevated for households already squeezed by higher rents, mortgages, and everyday bills. Here is the part traditional headlines skip: if Australia keeps rates high while other economies start cutting, global money can shift suddenly, hitting currencies, property markets, and stock prices across the region. There is a silent emergency growing in America's heartland, and it decides how much you pay for food every single week. Land O'Lakes CEO Beth Ford warns that U.S. farmers and ranchers are being hammered by food insecurity pressures, severe labor shortages, and rising costs that many simply cannot absorb anymore. When farms struggle to find workers and cover their costs, the pain does not stay in rural America. It shows up as higher grocery prices, less choice on shelves, and increased vulnerability to global shocks. Here is the twist: the U.S. is often called the world's breadbasket, but Beth Ford is effectively saying that without urgent policy action, that breadbasket is starting to crack. If the storm over U.S. agriculture keeps building, expect a future where food prices are more volatile, rural communities hollow out faster, and America's food security becomes one more geopolitical pressure point. Behind the hospital curtains, an entire workforce is living lives that swing between isolation and unexpected glamour: traveling nurses. For many, the job is brutally unpredictable and lonely, with constant relocations, unfamiliar cities, and the emotional weight of jumping into crisis wards over and over again. But there is also another side: travel, intense friendships with fellow staff, and a hint of glamour that comes from being on the move and in demand wherever the health system is most strained. Here is what mainstream coverage rarely says: traveling nurses are not just chasing adventure, they are plugging the holes of a healthcare system that cannot retain enough permanent staff. As long as burnout and staffing gaps keep rising, the demand for these nomadic professionals will grow, turning their lifestyle into a pressure gauge for the health of entire hospital networks. New Zealand's central bank just fired a warning shot at markets: rates are on hold for now, but the next move could be up, not down. Policymakers narrowly voted to keep the benchmark rate unchanged, choosing to wait and see how the conflict in the Middle East feeds into inflation and global financial stress. The key message between the lines: if energy prices spike again or supply chains get disrupted, rate hikes are back on the table to stop another inflation flare-up. Here is the pattern you are seeing with Australia and New Zealand together: smaller economies are being forced into tough choices as war-driven inflation collides with a fragile recovery. If New Zealand is pushed into fresh hikes, expect ripple effects across mortgages, business investment, and even housing markets that were already overheating before the last tightening cycle. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, one epidemic is biological, but the other is digital, and both are deadly. As Ebola spreads, so do conspiracy theories claiming the outbreak is a hoax or a foreign plot, fueling distrust of doctors, vaccination teams, and health authorities. That misinformation has real-world consequences: violence flares, treatment centers are attacked, and some communities refuse life-saving care, making the epidemic far harder to contain. Here is the part that exposes a much bigger problem: the same patterns of distrust and conspiracy that destabilize Ebola response in Congo are the exact same ones that undermined COVID-19 efforts and vaccine drives worldwide. If the virus of disinformation keeps mutating faster than public trust can recover, outbreaks stop being just medical emergencies, they become political and security crises that cross every border. China's factories just delivered a surprise: industrial profits are rising, even as the broader economy fights strong headwinds. At the start of the second quarter, industrial firms reported stronger profit growth, powered by higher energy prices and resilient overseas demand for technology products. This is happening despite a broader slowdown, property sector stress, and consumer demand that still looks fragile inside China. Here is what matters for the rest of the world. Profit strength in Chinese industry means exporters can keep flooding global markets with competitively priced tech and manufactured goods. If that continues while Western economies slow, political pressure for tariffs, trade barriers, and new industrial policies will only intensify, turning China's factory floor into a frontline of global economic conflict. In France, something crucial just broke that you cannot see on a chart: consumer confidence. Consumer confidence has dropped to a 3-year low as uncertainty and rising energy prices, fueled by the war in Iran, batter household sentiment. When confidence falls this far, people delay big purchases, cut back on spending, and brace for worse times ahead, creating a self-fulfilling drag on the economy. Here is the critical link: the same war pushing up energy prices is also shaping interest rate decisions in places like Australia and New Zealand, turning geopolitics into a daily psychological tax on consumers. If French confidence stays this low for long, expect political anger, street protests, and pressure on policymakers to cushion the blow, at the exact moment budgets are already stretched by defense and energy shocks. The ceasefire in Lebanon is cracking, and the stakes reach far beyond its borders. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel is deepening its operation in Lebanon as clashes resume and ceasefire promises start to ring hollow. At the same time, Donald Trump is pushing hard for an Iran deal, aiming to end the war and stabilize the region, including the sensitive choke point of the Strait of Hormuz. Here is the hidden chain reaction: every escalation in Lebanon threatens to pull in Iran and its allies, spook energy markets, and further hammer consumer confidence from Europe to Asia. As operations deepen and diplomacy scrambles to catch up, the real question is simple and brutal: will a fragile deal arrive in time to stop this local conflict from detonating the next global economic shock? Enjoyed today's digest? Subscribe to Axis Global News for daily news, straight to the point. Hit the bell and never miss a story.